Hello everyone and welcome to your ultimate guide to playing the ponziani opening. This is going to be a very in-depth guide to playing the aggressive ponziani. If you want to support me, you can like and subscribe. I hope you have a great time watching this, and let's get started. The ponziani comes after we play pawn to e4, black goes pawn to e5, we now play knight to f3 here. Attack the pawn, black defends with knight to c6. This is all very standard, and we now play the move c3 here. The point here is pretty simple. We're going to strike in the center with d4, and it's better now because if black captures, we can retake the c-pawn, and we'll then have two big pawns in the center. We also open up these squares for the queen, all of which are going to be very useful. First off, let's look at a move bishop to c5. This is very common at the beginner level, but it is simply not good because it plays right into our hands with d4. It now comes with tempo because we attack their bishop. Let's say they capture, we'll simply take back with the pawn. We're doing great here. We have two pawns in the center. This is exactly what we want. Let's say they back up to b6 here. We'll simply play knight to c3, just develop. If they go d6 here, trying to get some bishop to g4 stuff, that can get a little hairy because they have a lot of pressure on our pawn. Simply play h3 here. Prevent any of that from happening, and you're already doing very good here. Another try here would be if they give a check like this, but it doesn't really change our plan. We'd simply go knight to c3. Let's say they play knight to f6 here, attack the pin pawn. Well, here, we'd simply play bishop to d3. Defend it, and we don't really have any problems here after like d6. Once again, this is kind of annoying. We want to go h3, prevent that. And after castles, we're not completely winning here, but we have an advantage because we have the nice pawns in the center and a lot of good development. What else can I try? Because bishop c5 is, in all honesty, not a very good try. A better move here, the engine's best move, is pawn to d5. Striking in the center right away and attacking our pawn, and here you're going to play a very tricky move, queen to a4. With this move, you're doing a couple of things. You're pinning this knight to the king, meaning that this pawn here is actually now hanging, and you're also putting your queen the eyes on this pawn as well. The most common move here is for them to capture, which is a mistake because they now take back the knight. The material is equal, but this pawn is hanging. So after something like bishop to d7 here, let's say knight captures and queen captures, we can simply take the pawn. And we'll then go d4 here, develop our pieces. We're simply at the pawn here, and we are doing great here. Not really any problems. A more fun try would be queen to d5. Not really that good, because we can take their knight for our knight. They can't take the queen, because then they get pinned. That would be extremely tragic. They have to take the pawn. And here, even though they keep all of their material, after like bishop c4, we can simply go ahead and castle. We simply have an advantage here. Black's queen is the only piece they have out, which is not very good, and they have doubled isolated c-pawns. This pawn's also sitting duck. We are doing fantastic in that position. So, capturing the pawn would not be a very good option. What else can they try here? One fun try is f6. Defending the pawn like this, it looks a little awkward, but we have no way to directly punch this. We don't want to capture here. We simply want to play d3. Defend our pawn center. It looks a little passive, but we're going to get a good position out of this. If they ever capture, this is a mistake because we take back, and now our bishop is opened up for future development, and that just helps us. There's no reason to do that for them. A better move for them would be to simply develop with a move like bishop to e6, at which point development goes pretty normally. We're going to go bishop e3, bishop e2, our knight here will go on d2, and our plan here is likely to long castle. So if black like overextends, if, let's say g5 here, trying to push up and get some attack here after like h3, let's say they get really aggressive, they go h5, trying to attack us. We don't really care because we can simply play pawn to d4, and we're counter-striking in the center. It is getting pretty hectic here, but the variations are going to favor you. You can castle short, but more than likely you'll castle long because this can get a little scary. But, castle long, you're doing very well here. Engine gives the edge to you. What else they can try here? They have one very fun try, which is knight to f6 here, defending their center here, and after knight takes on e5, most people here don't know what they're doing, but if they find the correct move here with bishop to d6, we're going to capture their knight, they'll take back the pawn, and here you don't want to take this guy because after we take, and bishop d7. We are up 2 pawns here, but black has a lot of development, and this is just going to get way too scary. Instead, just play solid d3. You're up 1 pawn, defend this guy, and after something like castles, you can simply play bishop e2. You're preparing to castle quickly. If they try to attack the pawn, just defend it. Knight to d2 here. You're up 1 pawn. You're likely going to keep it. You'll castle, and you are doing very well in that position. Other tries that they can do here. Alright, so their absolute objectively best option here is something called the Caro Gambit after bishop d7, and we actually just capture the pawn on d5 here. And what's going to happen is, if black knows what they're doing, they'll play knight to d4. Discovered attack here, they're attacking our knight, so we have to back up to d1 to protect that. And after this trade, what is going on here is we're up 1 pawn, but it is on d5, and it is very, very loosey-goosey. So after something like knight to f6 here, what you want to do is play a very tricky bishop to e2 here. And first off, the most common move here is bishop to g4, which is a mistake, because after queen to g3, the bishop is hit, and also the pawn is hit. So after, like, captures, we can take this pawn, bishop blocks, and now queen takes this guy. And even though after knight captures, we are still only up 1 pawn, we can simply go d4 here. Our bishop is now up and up, we'll quickly castle, and we're up 1 pawn here with a very good position. Instead, their better try here after bishop e2 is to go bishop to d6, preparing to castle very quickly and leave this pawn for later, at which point how you want to play here is you want to go c4. Usually reinforcing the pawn like this is not a good idea, but here it is the best try to hang on to the pawn, and after something like castles, you'll castle as well. Let's say e4 here, attacking your queen. You want to save this square for your knight, so you're going to go queen to e3 here. Still keep your eyes on everybody. Let's say c6 here. You want to capture, bishop captures, and now simply go knight to c3. And although your position is still a little loose here, you are up 1 pawn. Your strike in the center you're going to play here is to go pawn to d4. So if they play like, I don't know, a6, you'll go pawn to d4. You have a nice big pawn center. If they capture, well, now they just traded off your really weak pawn. You can capture back, and you are doing great here. So that is how to handle the Caro Gambit and all the variations that lead after the pawn to d5 line there. Let's see what else they can try. A move here is pawn to f5. This is the Ponziani counter gambit. Objectively, it's a little but it can get pretty dangerous, especially if you don't know what you're doing. The best move here is to go pawn to d4. Don't get greedy, but instead counter-strike in the center, and what is going on here? If they capture our pawn on d4, you can actually play a counter gambit here with pawn up to e5, because after captures and knight captures, even though you are down 1 pawn here, black's king is way, way too open. This pawn is a fantastic wedge, and if black is not careful, bishop c4 and knight g5 is going to quickly win the game, which can happen in a lot of scenarios. That is going to be way too dangerous for them. A better move would be to capture the pawn on e4, and they're going to capture their pawn on e5. Once again, a couple of lines here. If they play like knight to f6, don't capture our knight back, then what we want to play here is bishop to b5. It looks a little odd, it's like you're pinning the knight, but it's not actually pinned. But after like bishop e7 here, the idea is after like bishop g5 and castles, this knight is going to be captured in a couple of moves because both your pieces are hitting it. So after this check, they can't walk over because then they get forked. That is going to be very bad. They would have to capture with their rook, and that's just going to be terrible for them. They have to play d5 here, and now both your pieces are pointed at this. So after captures, pawn captures, and bishop captures, their rook is trapped in the corner. And after like bishop e6, bishop captures, queen captures, you're not completely winning here, but you are up an exchange and a pawn. It can get a little dangerous, but you should be doing fine here after something like castles or knight to f6 developing, and you are actually doing quite well in that position. Instead of knight to f6 here, a better try for them objectively would be to capture the knight here. You'll capture back with the pawn, and the line you want to know here is after d5. You don't leave the pawn here, you want to capture, bishop captures, and now the important queen to a5 check, queen a4 check, forking their king and pawn, and after bishop blocks, you would simply capture, let's say they block the knight, you can simply go bishop to c4 here, you're up a pawn, you're preventing them from castling, and you're actually just kind of dominating them in that position. Alright, so with that ponziani counter gambit covered, let's look at what is their probably most common main line, maybe not objectively best, but still most common, knight to f6. Attacking our e4 pawn here and developing the knight. What you're going to play here is you're going to strike in the center with d4. And they have two options here, or actually I guess three options. The first one is pawn to d6, which is not very good. Defending a pawn like this is good, but the bishop is blocked out, so really it's bad. After like bishop to d3 here, let's say bishop to g4, you want to play pawn to d5. Just attack the knight, not let it get any business on your d4 pawn. Let's say knight backs up to e7, you'll go h3 here. Attack the bishop. They don't really want to trade, they're going to back up to h5. You now would simply play c4 here, and you have an advantage. Your pawn structure is really, really strong in the center. And also, if they play knight to g6, a very natural move, open up the bishop, then now we have a nice pawn to g4. Attack the bishop, it is trapped, it will be forced to sacrifice a piece, and after bishop drops back to e2, you're up material here, you have a knight for 2 pawns, you still have a very strong pawn center, and yeah, you really have nothing to complain about here. You are doing very well. You'll likely castle along because your king side is ruined. What else can they try? Their best move here is to capture on d4. I'll look at this first. What you'll do now is you don't want to capture back right away. You want to play e5. Attack their knight, they have to move it somewhere. First off, g4, very bad square. You would simply capture back the pawn, and you have just, 2 strong pawns in center. If they play like d6, and after h3, knight backs up, you can simply ruin their pawn structure with the trade, and yeah, you're just completely dominating there. Knight to g4 is not good square. Another square that's not very good is knight to e4, but here you want to know a tricky queen to e2. Attacking their knight, and there's going to be some discovered attack here. If they just move the knight, then we can simply capture. Once again, we have 2 good pawns. We're doing very, very well there. If they try d5 here to defend the knight, then now we capture with en passant. And actually can't capture back the knight because it is still pinned here. So after like f5 here, the best move is not even to capture again. It's to go knight takes on d4 with the threat of f3 and the knight will be lost. And you are doing very, very well in that position. Their best move here is to go knight to d5. And how you'll play this, you're going to play it in a gambit way with bishop c4, knight backs up to b6, and bishop back up to b3. If they capture here and accept this kind of gambit, we would take back the knight, and we have full compensation for being down a pawn. We have a lot of development. This bishop is an absolute monster, and black's knights here are especially weak. And after something like bishop to e7 here, and castles, we're already doing very well. We have prospects of attacking their king, and once again, you have full compensation for being down a pawn. Their best try here is to go pawn to d5, strike in the center, at which point you'll take on d4 for the pawn. Let's say bishop g4 here, pinning the knight. These are all the most common moves. You'll now go knight to c3. This is a bit of a surprising move because they can capture the bishop. Key move here, don't capture the queen because then they take here. This is quite unpleasant. Instead, take the pawn. That way, your plan here is to go queen up to d3. You're going to go bishop e3 here, and you're actually going to long castle. That way, this ruined king side doesn't really matter. If anything, it's going to help you because you can put your rook here, attack on the g-file, potentially go f4, f5, attack like that, and you are actually doing quite well in that position. Lastly, let's look at the very, very fun trappy line here, which is here, knight takes on e4. You'll now push your pawn up to d5 here, and they have one line here which is really deadly, which is bishop to c5. I'll look more at this in a second. This is the Vukovic gambit. But first, let's look at the kind of trap here they can fall into. The knight is attacked. Let's say they back it up to e7 here. You'll now play knight takes on e5 here. And the most common move here by far, it's like 85% of games, something crazy, is d6. Attacking the knight, but this is losing after bishop to b5 check. And yeah, they're just completely losing here. If they block the bishop, you can simply capture. They just get completely suffocated. That is terrible. And everything they do here is losing. After like c6, we're going to capture that with the pawn. If they take our knight, then after pawn captures, discover check, we're going to promote. But before we do that, even deadlier move is to capture on d7 and then promote. This is just complete overkill after like knight c8. Queen takes, yeah, this is complete murder. There's absolutely no hope for them there. Their best try here, objectively, is to capture back on c6. We'll take with the knight. They can't take like this because then they get completely forked here, or I guess triple forked. You could say trorked here. That is very good. Instead, queen to b6 is their best move here, attacking the bishop, at which point we'll back up our knight to d4 here, give this check, and after like bishop d7 and this trade here, you're not completely winning because you're only up one pawn here, but their position is horrible, and I mean horrible, and after like just castles here, your development is going to be natural, their knights are all over the place, their king's on d7, their position is just completely everywhere, doesn't make any sense, you are pretty much winning here. Let's look at the line that I mentioned was really dangerous. I have another analysis board just to show it because there is quite a little bit. Real quick though, back in the trap line here after knight e7, if they know what they're doing, they'll play knight to g6 here instead of d6, at which point you'll simply capture back, they'll take the pawn, and after like bishop d3 here, attacking their knight, let's say knight moves, you have a pretty simple game here. You're going to castle, then you'll play pawn to c4, reinforce your center, let's say castle here, you'll simply go knight to c3, you are doing very well here, you really have no problems, you'll likely play h3 to prevent any nastiness on the g4 square, and yeah, you really have no problems here, you don't really have anything to complain about. But, back here, you do have something to complain about after bishop c5. This marks the Vukovic gambit, and I'll be honest here, if you get an opponent that plays this, I'll be honest, just you are in for a rough time because this is objectively the absolute best option against the ponziani. What to do here is you have to be brave, you have to capture on c6, and look at death right in his eyes. If they capture on f2 with the knight, this is not the best move because you now have queen to d5 here. This is a very typical move. We attack the bishop, we attack the pawn, and we also attack b7 with the fork here. If they capture the pawn, then yeah. If they capture our rook in the corner, then we would simply take their bishop here. And we're actually doing quite well because even though we are still down 1 point of material here, their knight in the corner is dead. And what I mean by dead is you don't have to go and chase a knight. It's not getting out. You can simply go bishop e3, develop your knight, long castle. There is no hope for the knight in the corner. And if they play bishop back to b6 here instead, then this is just going to be a beefed up version of the other line here. Other line I'm talking about is bishop takes on f2 check. You have to move your king up to e2, and now they back the bishop up to b6. And it's getting very dangerous. They're now threatening knight into f2, and you're going to get forked, so the move you have here is queen to d5. Same move, attacking the knight, attacking the pawn, attacking the fork on b7, which point we win another piece. Let's say they play knight to f2 here, most common move. You'll now play rook over to g1. They do have this discovery attack, but they actually don't really have anything they can really do with that. First off, they capture the pawn on c6 with the b pawn. Then now we would take on e5, and this is actually not a very strong option, because after king to f8, you'll play knight to d4. Completely sever the connection they have here. And after knight g4 attacking queen, you can simply move it over to f4 here. You'll run your king to refuge on c2. You're up 1 point of material here, and at least for the meantime, the onslaught is actually over, and black's attack is actually kind of at a standstill, especially if their king very awkward on f8. Instead, their absolute best try is to castle here, and knight capture on b7, get the fork, and after captures and queen captures, you're up 2 entire pieces here. You're up 4 points of material, so 2 pieces for 2 pawns. Black's best move here is to go queen to f6, and try and get some attacking business here. This can get really, really dangerous. The best move here is to go knight bd2. They push up to e4, and now you play knight to c4 here. Attacking the bishop, which is defending the knight, but also we're sacrificing a piece. But it doesn't really matter because after pawn takes and queen takes, we're still up an entire piece here. So even though they can give one measly check, we'd simply block with bishop to e3, and even though with all of our problems here, the attack has stopped. Their knight is now trapped in the corner. More than likely, this knight is going to capture this bishop, and even though your king is still kind of stuck in the center, if you can get out of this, which you likely will, you're simply up an entire piece here, in which you will have just simply a winning position. Alright, thank you so much for watching this video on the Ponziani opening. This took quite a bit of time to work out all the variations, so if you want to support me, you can like and subscribe. I also have a lot of other opening guides, especially these in-depth ones for a lot of other openings if you want to check those out. I hope you have a great day, and I will see you next time.